Hello everyone, good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I hope you're all well, and if you're working in retail, then I hope your reopenings have gone well this week. I'm joined today by our guest speaker, Ed Goodman, who will be running our session, Social Media, How Do You Know If You're Doing It Right? However, just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. So we leave the chat open for you to say hello. I can see, oh wow, hi from Cairo. Please do interact with us and interact with each other. It's there for you guys to feedback. We'll also be doing questions at the end. So please use the questions tab. Even if you have a question early on, I will start with those first when we get to the end of the session. And we'll also be running some polls. In fact, I'm going to drop one in there now, and I can see some of you have already started answering on the social media one. It's important for us as we start planning these sessions going forward that we get the timing right for you. So I've just dropped one in there now to say what is the best time for us to run these sessions for you in the future. So if you could just let us know, and added to that, this session will be available after the session's taken place. So look out for an email from us. It'll also detail future sessions as well. So yeah, and as always, your feedback is always welcome. And lastly, we are live. So if we have any technical issues or maybe a video feed, please bear with us, and we'll try and sort it out as quickly as possible. But I can see, oh, good morning. There's a lot of people online. That's fantastic. I'm going to pass over to Ed now to start the session.
Oh, no, don't pass over to me. I'm just looking from where people are dialing in from. This is great. As Susanna said, good morning, by the way, and welcome everyone. But as Susanna said, and as so many of you are doing, do let us know where you're tuning in from. We've got everywhere from Cardiff to Cairo at the moment, and from Brussels to Bridgnorth. And I hope the sun is shining wherever you are too. So welcome. I'm from Bedfordshire. I spent many a year living in Bedfordshire. Takes me back. But I'm dialing in from Cambridgeshire this morning, and delighted to spend the next hour with you going through and answering the question, how do you know if you're doing social media right? And also to be able to answer your questions as well. So I'll be talking for about 40 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity afterwards to post your questions too. So as Susanna's already said, make sure you do that in the questions tab. Hello from Buckingham, the Cotswolds, beautiful Glasgow. Not that Buckingham of the Cotswolds isn't beautiful, but great to see you all here. So yeah, and I'll deal with any questions you may have afterwards as well. Of course, if we do whatever run out of time, then there's places to submit questions. I'll give them to you at the end, including my Twitter address, which you can see on the slide you're looking at now. Firstly, I do this from a considerable experience. So personally, I've been working with retailers across the country and overseas as well, in Europe and over in Western Asia. And we've taken our knowledge from the retailers that we work with and the other businesses too, and squeezing it down, condensing all of that into the talk that we're going to go through this morning. And it's a lot to get through. Now, I do also have a colleague or two of mine tuning in as well who will try and deal with any points you might raise too. But obviously, like I say, after that, we'll be able to get your questions and also feedback too, which we'll do at the end. So anyway, let's crack on with the main topic of conversation, which is why we're doing this. And I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey through the social media experience for both you, but also for those that you're looking to connect with as well. And to help us understand this, we really understand whether we're successful, that is, we really need to understand how social media works best. So let's start with one question here. How many of you, and it's a difficult one because I can't see your faces or put your hand up, but put your hand up, and I'm going to assume that no one will, if I said to you, how many of you joined social media so that you could be sold to by all the brands that you connect with? No, I didn't think so. And I'm going to assume that because whenever I ask this question on any course in any part of the world, no one ever does put their hands up. So, but yet many businesses use social media as an opportunity to sell to their target audience. They'll go on social media as a way of just talking about the products and services that they sell. So now put yourself in this other position. Imagine you're at a networking event, for example, which I know many of you would have been on before. So imagine you're at a networking event and you meet someone, and that person just comes up to you and goes, "Hello, my name's Ed. This is what I do. This is where I work. These are the products or services I sell, which range from this amount of price. I've been doing it for this long. Look, I've got my phone with me. Here are pictures of my car or my house. This is where I went on holiday." I mean, quite frankly, it won't be long before you make the best excuse you can to disappear away from that person. And that's because actually we're sociable creatures. We love sharing information, but we love consuming it too. And social media isn't any different to that. It's a human-driven tool, not a data-driven tool. So whereas the challenge for a business is on one hand that we want to be able to compete fairly and effectively and efficiently, but we also want to make sure that we're not alienating our audiences by just talking about us. You go to a marketplace, you absolutely expect people to be showing their wares to you there and looking to grab your attention. But in social media, grabbing attention isn't by just showcasing what you do. It's for so many other reasons too. So when people do sign up to social media, it's so often so that people can be kept informed of new products and services. And that's true. And I'm not saying you can't talk about them, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But people also join social media and follow a brand because they want the customer service, because they want to consume entertaining content, because they want to be able to offer feedback. And the advantage we've got as a business, wherever we're based, from Oxfordshire to Brussels to Edinburgh to I was trying to see to Stirlingshire in Balfron, then what we can do is we can wherever we are, we can connect with our target audience and get them inspired by the stories that we tell, which is often the reason why we are in the business that we're in the first place, and the reason that we've chosen these particular products or services to sell. So a couple of questions about the Twitter address on there. I'll put all the contact information at the end, so don't worry about that. So let's remember that there is two parts to this, and the sweet spot in the middle comes from understanding that as human beings, we go onto social media because we want to be kept informed, because we want to be inspired, we want to be able to share our experiences, we want to view other people's stories, we want to watch enjoyable videos or laugh at images. But of course, from a retailer's perspective, we want to, especially as we start to reopen again and start to play the catch-up game, we want to be able to compete with everyone else, big or small, and make sure that we use social media to achieve our marketing objectives. So that's the journey that we're going to go through this social media kind of understanding over the course of this morning's talk. And remember, we've been doing this all our lives. Since the dawn of human civilization, we've been carving images on cave walls, and we've been carving hieroglyphics on pyramids. We've been meeting in the Persian coffee shops of the 1600s, and here we are sending emojis to each other on WhatsApp. The technology has changed and evolved, but as human beings, we remain as sociable as ever. And social media is there to enhance that, to develop that, to underpin that, not to control how we connect with each other. So let's have a look through how this works, and a lot of understanding. The understanding of, because if I go back a couple of slides, I can answer the question, how do you know if you're doing it right? Because you've achieved or exceeded your goals. That's the short answer to a question. But we have to go back to the beginning, which is understanding those goals in the first place before we can then understand whether we've achieved them or not. So we'll have a look at that brief journey in a moment. But the first thing we need to do is lay the foundation stones, as if you were building a brick wall or a new house. Then that foundation stone is a very simple question to start with. Why are we on social media? What do we want to achieve from our social media activity? And I'd love you to put in the comments box, why are you on social media? One of the questions in the poll is very much about, if I go back to it, the question is, what social media platforms do you use for your business? And Facebook seems to be the clear and advantage at the moment, Instagram being second, and then we go down to Pinterest, etc. If you haven't answered the poll, then go into it. I'd love to see. So why? When you consider that setting up a Facebook page is free, advertising aside, obviously that isn't, but when you set up a Facebook page, the time you spend doing that, every hour you spend on social media is an hour you're not doing something else. So why are you on social media? To build an engaged audience that they'll buy from me. Absolutely, brilliant. We're on social media to build relationships, awareness and engagement. I love the engagement being the heartbeat of this, because that's going to stand you in good stead throughout all of this. To share our vision, poetic or poetry to my ears, to engage with our customers and create brand loyalty, showing off our products as well as our personalities. Yes, I'm going to come back to that in a moment. To show our warmth, build our brand. Thank you for dropping that in. Increase brand awareness and grow slides, to create a link to my offerings. So many reasons. So we have to marry ourselves, marry the reason why we're on social media to the reasons why people following us. And these reasons are phenomenal. And it's okay to build awareness of fair trade, or to make people aware of what we're trying to do, but also understand that people join social media not to be sold to, that we have to get that balance right as well. So that foundation stone has to be, why are we doing this in the first place? And then we can start to add to that. So what is it that you want to achieve from your social media activity? You're starting to apply to this already. And also, what about budget? Again, I've mentioned that using Facebook as a page as its own is free, and I doubt that'll ever change. But of course, advertising is chargeable. So whenever we start to formulate or include advertising into our mix, then we have to understand how much budget we're applying to that. What does success mean to us? What makes us different? And so many of you have already put this, because of our passions, because of our stories, because we have an ecological focus for what we do. I mean, even using social media to raise a profile and let people know I exist, it's fantastic. But how many know whether social media has achieved that goal for you? To get exposure and recognize and to sell my things, how will you know if social media has achieved that for you? To see other perspectives and educate myself about what's happening in other parts of the world. I love that. To inspire, educate, and entertain, to reach further into the value chain with our products. Again, how would you know if social media has achieved that or not? So when we look at our business as a whole, our business will have its own goals, or the products that we want to focus on, the market that we want to sell into, and why we are different from our competitors. And so often that difference comes from the people who run the shops, the people who work there, the people who own them. You're the reason that is so often the case, the reason that people buy from you as opposed to buying from others, because of the service they get from you. I think of the retailers I buy from, big and small, it's because of the personality so often within it. And for many others, it's price, variety of products, of course. But social media can help educate people about what we do, what value we add to our community, where our passion and inspiration for running this business comes from. And when we tell those stories, people will buy from us. We've heard the adage, right, that we develop relationships personally and professionally with people we know, like, and trust. And again, social media can enhance and escalate that journey when we get it right. So to understand this, we have to set ourselves a more specific goal. So on one hand, we can say, because I want to drive more traffic to our website, brilliant. I want to sell more products, fantastic. But how do we know whether the part that social media has achieved is successful or not? Let me give you a scenario. Imagine that you have launched a new product and you put it out there on your Facebook page. Now, I must stress, first of all, that the chance of you posting a product at the exact moment that your target audience is looking to buy that product is very slim, which is why we need to kind of build up this momentum and go for more of a long-term relationship. But let me go back to the scenario anyway. So imagine that you post a product that you've got come in on your Facebook page, and you end up with loads of visitors to your website. Loved. No one really engages on it, but that's okay for this example. And they click on the link, and loads of people visit the website and learn more information about it. But your sales don't increase. Now, In this scenario, where does the fault lie? Does the fault lie with social media? Do we think, hang on a second, social media hasn't really achieved what we wanted it to achieve? Or does the fault lie somewhere else? The reason why I ask that point is because it's so often blamed at the feet of social media, because I hear it constantly. We spend loads of money on advertising, but no one ever buys anything. But yet every time someone clicks on an advert is the only time you pay. So it would imply the advert's done something right. Loads of people clicked on a link that I put in an organic post in social media, but no one bought anything, which makes me feel that if loads of people clicking on the link, then social media has done its job. But this is only part of the journey. So we need to understand where social media, where the fault of social media lies. So saying that I want to sell more products is an absolutely perfectly reasonable goal to have, because I assume it's a business goal. Where social media comes into this is when we answer the question, actually, how can social media influence that goal? So I've left an example on here, which would be more pertinent, I believe, to a social media responsibility, such as, and again, this isn't a goal to tell you to put in, but to give you an idea from a smart perspective, that our goal is to increase traffic by 20% over the next 3 months from social media. Because then we know that once someone has gone from that Facebook post to that web page or to that product page, then the relationship in terms of social media and that process has gone. Social media has done its bit. The responsibility now lies with the website. And it might fall over because the website's been slow to load, or there's too much detail on the product page. There's not enough detail on the product page. If it's lead generation, it might be the form is too complex to fill in, or it's not it's not a responsive website, as in it's not as suitable for mobile phones as it is for a static terminal like a laptop or desktop. So we need to understand when we're applying goals, that we are applying goals that are specifically responsible to social media. And why is this important? Because when we're answering the question, how do we know when we've got it right? We can only know the answer to that when we know what social media's responsibility is in the first place. And understand that this is a roadmap, that people might hear about us before they've gone onto social media because someone has spoken about us. Someone has mentioned us in a local Facebook group, for example. Then they come to our social media page and they go, we're there. We've got their attention, and they'll look at our content and they might feel inspired or entertained or educated or informed or empowered. And then they think, that's great. I'm going to click on the link and then I'm going to go to the website. Social media is done. So we need to understand when we set a goal that we need to accept that this is the goal for our business. This is how social media can support that. And this is the specific responsibility that social media has to help us achieve that goal. If we're selling products through our website and not social media, our goal can't be to sell more products, because that's the overall marketing goal. We can't put all of that blame on social media, because then when we measure it at the end, it'll be incomplete and incorrect information, and we won't know whether we've achieved it or not. Now, of course, driving traffic is just one side of it. If we're building awareness, it could be because we're looking to increase the number of people who share our content or who comment on our posts, or we're looking more engagement-driven content as well. Certainly some platforms have more better analytical data around that as well, and Facebook and Instagram, which I've predicted would be the main answer to your poll, is the two platforms that I've focused on here. But we need to ensure that we make sure that we put the responsibility on social media and that we use the right analytical data to tell us that we're right, whether that is engagement or whether that's driving traffic or something else. So that's the first part of this journey, the first part of the journey for us. Before we get to the measurement side of it, the first part of the journey is to understand what the goal is in the first place and where social media's responsibility lies. And when we've set our goal, and again, I'll go back to the SMART acronym for this as well. So something that is specifically responsible to social media, that is measurable, achievable, realistic, and we've set a time frame. And when you're setting a time frame, be aware to give yourself a sufficient time frame. Don't achieve a goal. If you achieve a goal that says, I want to increase traffic to my website by 20% by the end of the week, or even the end of the month, you're going to struggle to get that momentum in time, especially if you start to change the behavior about your content as well. So bear that in mind when you're setting a goal, to give yourself a 2 or 3 month goal. And those goals can change and those goals can vary. On Instagram, my goal is to do this for the next 3 months, or on Facebook, my goal is to do that, or my goal is here and I'm going to use Facebook to go this way around to that goal by showing people behind the brand, the people who work there, the process with which we go from, kind of creation to the shop floor. And I'm going to use Facebook to get to this point, which could be another form of education as well. So driving user-generated content or something else along those lines. So that's understanding the goals in the first place. Excuse me one moment. An integral part of the talk, even short, is to keep the voice box lubricated. Has nothing to do with my addiction to caffeine whatsoever. Anyway, so then when we've set the goal for ourselves, the next part of this is to then start to create the content. So a couple of slides here on just how you can go about this. Firstly, you've got to be proactive. Just setting your Facebook page up and kicking back, well, that's not going to make sure that people come to you. You have to go and reach them. And you can't just get them to follow you by saying follow us. You have to get them to follow you because they enjoy it. So when you create your Instagram page or your Facebook page, then make sure you understand to yourself, why should someone follow us on Facebook and Instagram? What's in it for them? I know why we want it, because you've answered your criteria to raise your profile, to increase your audience, to build awareness of your brand, to sell more products. That's fine. But why should someone follow you? And your website is great, but why should someone follow you on Facebook? Why should someone follow you on Instagram? What is the benefit to them to do that? Because when we answer that question, again, it's when we marry those two goals so perfectly together. And then also as well, when you are sharing content, to understand, well, why should someone enjoy this? Now, let me just tell you one of the lesser known facts. I think it's becoming more widely known. So forgive me if you know this already, but you'll know if you have a Facebook profile, how you only see the posts of a small percentage of friends you're actually connected to on Facebook. You think, oh, I've never heard from David before. I don't know where he is, but then you realize he never posts on social media, and you go to his profile and you realize it's littered with posts, but it's not fed through to your news feed. And the reason is because social media channels, and it's not unique to Facebook-owned platforms, that social media channels want to make sure that the content that is shown to you is content you're going to engage with, because it will then make you go back to the platform more frequently. If it was content you didn't engage with, and I mean like kind of commenting or liking or sharing, not just scrolling past, then you're less likely to go back. There'll be the lesser desire for you, and the platforms will struggle. Well, the same rule applies to your pages. You post something on your page, it'll only appear in the news feed of about 5% of the people who follow you. Now, if you create engaging content, and by engaging, I'm talking more comments and shares than I am likes. Likes is like a virtual high five. No one falls in love over a high five. They fall in love over conversations. So comments and shares are more important. So when you are posting, as I say, it'll only appear in about 5% of the newsfeed to people of the people who follow you. But create engaging content, then subsequent posts could increase that. It could be 10%, it could be 15%, it could be 20%, it could be 50%, it could be more. So focus on that engagement and focus on the comments and the shares, and then below that, the likes. And then the more of those you generate, and the same applies to Instagram too. Getting likes to your posts is all well and good, but when you get comments, that's where it's more powerful. Then your subsequent posts will be seen by more people. Just to reiterate as well, I will be talking for until about 22 or 25 or quarter to. So do leave your questions as well. If you've got some questions for me to ask at the end, then put them in the questions tab, as Suzanne has just mentioned. So that's one thing. Post content, follow others, connect with others who may be inspired by you, and also people who might have a similar audience. If you're an independent retailer in a town, then follow the other independent retailers in a town. A collaborative effort is going to benefit everyone, of course. Look to increase your reach by using hashtags, relevant hashtags. Don't just put hashtag shop, hashtag shoes. Be more specific and relevant, because the more hashtags you use, then actually it can affect the aesthetics of your post. Even Instagram says don't use more than about 5 or 6 hashtags. Don't use hashtags on Facebook at all. I think that's a waste of time entirely. But even with Instagram, less is more. Collaborate with other pages, as I mentioned already. You can share their content, share your content, use stories to do that as well. If one of your local retailers who isn't in competition with you has something that you think is amazing, then share it, shout about it. The law of reciprocity will direct them to doing the same for you at some point. So build up that bank. And also get engaged. Every comment someone leaves on your Instagram post, reply to it. If they leave you a big detailed comment, then leave them a detailed comment in response. If they leave just a brief, amazing, thank you, then leave them a brief response. But always get involved and ask people for their opinions. When we come to Facebook, look to engage with other businesses, look to go with relevant content as well. Have a plan for what you're trying to achieve and also who you're trying to achieve it for. If the foundation stone that we're laying at the bottom is why we're doing this, then what sits on top of that is who we're doing it for, who is our target audience. And then who sits on top of that is, how frequently we're going to post, the type of content they're likely to be inspired by and what we want them to ultimately do. So talk to them, ask them their questions. And this goes back to something that I mentioned before. If 100% of your posts have all been about you, have all been about the products and services you sell, then I want you to reduce that. Not a little, but a lot. I want you to reduce it to around 20% all being about you. And about the other 80% will be all about your audience. Ask them, not what they had for breakfast, ask them relevant content. If you're a fashion retailer, then ask them ask them questions about the kind of outfits they would look to go out in. Ask them what is their idea of lockdown chic. Ask them when they do buy a new pair of shoes or they buy a new jacket or dress, what do they look for in that purchase? Ask them anything. Run a poll. Get them to share their images of they've bought a shed off you, whatever it is you're selling, and they've put it up, and ask them to share an image of what it looks like too. And respond to every comment you get. Get your fans to love you on social media because, as I said before, the chances of you posting at the exact moment that someone's looking to buy, the chances of those two things happening at the same time are pretty remote. But what we want to do is get our fans to love us. So at the point they want to make that purchasing decision, we're at the top of the tree, above all the other competitors, because we've had their interests at heart throughout our content, throughout. Be human. So if you use kind of informal language, you have a particular style about how you talk, then try and include that in your content as well. Obviously, don't avoid being prejudiced or antagonistic, and certainly don't insult your customers, but try and add personality behind your brand. And some brands do this really well. Innocent Drinks has got to be one of the standouts to this, right? You go to Innocent Drinks, they have a very kind of strong personality. One that always reminds me of like a cheeky teenager, one that you wouldn't mind your kid hanging out with, but you can imagine is a bit of a pain for the teachers at school. They're consistent in everything they do. Their emails, their branding on their vehicles, their packaging, and their social media too. So what's your personality? If your brand was to walk through that door any moment now, then how old would they be? How would they talk to you? What car would they have parked outside, if they even had a car? Because the more you can define the personality of your brand, the more you can get that brand across to other people. It's easier to create a brand when people can see the whites of your eyes. It's harder when they're looking at a logo. So humanize your brand where you can. But the content side is the bit that I want to spend the less time out, because this is about how do you know if you're doing it right. One of which is to set your stall out by setting your goals out in the first place. Then we formulate the content to get it right and to vary our content and to vary the timings and use hashtags, etc. Then we get to the measuring side of it as well. And just as important as it is to determine what we want to achieve from our social media activity, then it is to set time aside to determine whether we've achieved that or not. So go back to your SMART objectives and only set an objective that ticks that SMART box. Because if your goal is, I want to sell more products, and that's your goal, you get to measuring it. Well, how has social media helped you? Not really sure. Because if you're answering it that way, then actually we've let ourselves down in using social media as effectively as we can. If we've set the goal, I want to increase web traffic by 20% over the next 3 months to my shoes page. I keep going on about shoes. I don't need shoes. I don't know why I keep going on about it, but there you go. Then when we do that, we can say, well, has social media achieved that traffic? Well, yes, if you look at the right tools, and I'll give you some examples of those in a moment. How much time have we spent on this? How much budget have we spent on it if we're boosting posts or taking out adverts as well? Also, what else can we do to determine this? Who is the audience that we've been connecting with? And thankfully, Facebook and Instagram can tell us this. How has our channel grown? Now, I will stress that if you eagle-eyed observers would have noticed when I put the SMART goals slide up, that I didn't include follower numbers. That's because follower numbers is largely an irrelevant metric. Because if you have 100 followers in your page and they're all engaged with you and they're all liking and commenting and hopefully buying from you, then is that worse than having 1,000 followers who do nothing? Or is it better? I think we both know it's better. So focus on the getting as much as you can out of your audience, and naturally your audience will grow. Much as you can, I'm talking about engagement, but your audience will grow because they'll invite their friends and their peers to you as well. Remember, we're 6 degrees of or 6 steps away from anyone else in the world. So we can get them to attract their friends and their peers too. So who are we engaging with? Which posts are doing well? Which posts aren't doing well? What's the traffic to our website looked at? And also I would propose, have a look at your competition. What have they done during the same time frame? How engaging have they been? All right, fair enough. You won't have the same level of data about their activity as you do about your own, but you can get a relevant insight. How active have they been? What's worked well for them? What hasn't worked well for them? And how can that influence us? And by the way, a competitor isn't just someone who sells the same thing in your area. A competitor could be someone who is a wholesaler or retailer selling the same thing on the other side of the country. It's ultimately someone who provides a similar service or has a similar personality to yours. Get an idea of what works well and what looks right for them too. Now, one of the best tools for this from a website perspective is without a doubt Google Analytics. And I've put the URL at the bottom of this, which is analytics.google.com. Never been a fan of cold coffee. But if you go to that, then Google Analytics will give you a wealth of information, the vast majority of which you probably won't use. So I'm going to focus on the bits you are. It's a free tool. It's a bit of code that goes into the pages on your website. So if your website is developed by someone else, then speak to your developer. And of course, if you in the process of your website being put together, then make this an integral part of it. When you do add Google Analytics, you can't look at historical data. You can only look at what happens from that point onwards. And then what you'll get is the dashboard, which is the screenshot that I've given you here. But what Google Analytics will tend to show you is how many people have visited your website every day. And you can set the date range. So if you've got a particular sale on as we approach July, and I assume we're approaching July, difficult to know when it is at the moment, but as we approach July, then you might decide, okay, what's the date range that you want to run your traffic data from? But also it won't just tell you who's visited your website, but also tell you where they came from. Did they come from the Google search engines or other search engines? And Google Analytics will tell you what they put into Google, which is brilliant because that can form inspiration for future content as well. It will also tell you when they view it, whether it's social media, and you can drill down further still to find out which platforms. So for example, if I go back to the poll, 75% of you use Facebook for your business, 19% Instagram, and the rest are 1% or lower, with the exception of LinkedIn, who's 3%. But what if you were told that you're on Facebook and Instagram, you think Facebook is the best, but actually it's Instagram that's driving the most traffic? How would that affect what you do? Because surely if the data tells you that it's a different platform to the one you're expecting, then that's what we need to act upon. It will tell you how long they spend on your website, how many pages, what's the bounce rate. A bounce rate being when someone visits a page, looks at it and then disappears without doing anything else, which we want a low percentage for a bounce rate. You can even set e-commerce goals on your Google Analytics as well, so you can determine when people are visiting your website, not just what you're achieving through sales, but in terms of activity and viewing and time spent, how much that is achieving for your business as well. So there's a huge amount on Google Analytics. Come to have a look on the Social Bee website. That we've got blogs on there. I mean, we've also got podcasts and webinars that we do, a lot of which talks about Google Analytics, so we can offer some more support there as well. But Google Analytics is an incredibly powerful tool to tell you actually what your web data is achieving and where it's come from. So there's also the platforms too. Here's Instagram. This is the Instagram dark setting, so obviously you can change it from dark to light. So Instagram tells you about what happens on your Instagram page. Who are your followers on Instagram? What's their location, their gender, their age group? When are they most active? Which I think is brilliant. If your Instagram is telling you that your followers are most active on a Thursday, then you're going to post on a Thursday, whatever the rest of the week looks like. And then it will tell you this action before they then go to your website, which is when Google Analytics data takes over. So again, Instagram will tell you which posts have had the best interaction, and will give you some more insights to help you make the right decisions for your social media activity in the future. Now, Instagram data got so much better when Facebook bought it and has slowly progressed, but it's been led by the huge amount of insights you get on your Facebook page. If you've just started a Facebook page, you think, well, I haven't got any access to insights, then I think you need something like 25 followers before Facebook has enough data to give you the insights. But again, here's a dashboard that we're looking at on Facebook Insights here, which can give you an idea of which posts have had the best impressions, which is when someone sees your comment, or the best engagement, which ones have had the less, where your followers come from, what days they're most active, what time of day they're most active as well. So again, you can plan when your audience is live so that you can get your content out there as best as possible. Here's another example from a Facebook Insights screen as to what works best. This looks at who your followers are rather than the data themselves. So there's so much information. Instagram gives us all this bits of information here. Facebook gives us all this bits of information there. And Google Analytics gives us all this huge chunk of information here. And that's not even touching on the 3% of you who say you use LinkedIn and Twitter, which also their information so often varies as well. So your best bet is very often to create your own spreadsheet. Go back to the goal you set in the first place. What do you need to know? What do you need to know to determine whether you've been successful or not? Then take the bits and pieces and then put them into the spreadsheet itself. One question here is, are you going to show us how to do the how? So of what you're giving information about. And the reason I want to mention that, and I will come for more questions at the end if you put them in the questions box, which is a very good question. The short answer to that is there is so much here. Time just doesn't allow me to go into the bits and pieces of information. So when you have an Instagram page, make sure it's an Instagram for business, which means you have to have a Facebook page for your business as well. And then Insights is at the top, as you can see from this image here. If you look close to the top, just underneath the search bar, it says Insights, which is where you have all this information. If you go to Instagram, then you also have the Insights on your Instagram page as well. So have a look at those bits to start with. But again, we have webinars and blog posts and podcasts to help give you even more insight data into that as well. But also Google Analytics is more in depth, and sadly time can allow us to today. So by all means get in touch and we can look to see how we can help you further still there. And bearing in mind, this is just a smidgen of the information that's available to you. And I'm not saying you're going to do all of this. So I've got a question for you too. What other apps do you have? So Hootsuite is one. A lot of people use Hootsuite for scheduling and social listening. Buffer is my preference for scheduling. Follower analyzes Twitter followers to again determine which of those are most ideally influential or most active, can help you find the right followers to connect with. So what are the other tools you use to help you with your social media? And I love the ones that are coming through. Social Mention, I put on here, Social Mention looks at how websites and social media activity are perceived, whether there's a positive perception about them or negative feeling is about them, which is great. Iconosquare, which looks at even more in-depth detail about Instagram and Facebook as well. So Sprinkler, Buffer, a couple there for Buffer too. So Canva's brilliant, right? So Canva is a phenomenal tool that can give you a perfect template for an Instagram post or a Facebook post, and even give you some ideas of what those templates can be. And then you can edit the text, edit the images. Canva, canva.com is a great one to go to. I'm sorry, I didn't put that in this slide. Tailwind, I'm not familiar with Tailwind. I like it when I learn something from this. I'm going to go into that. Thank you very much. Canva again. Follow a Guard, quite a few fans for Canva here, I was here, and I can't say I'm surprised. Canva makes me look like I'd like to say a graphic designer. Poorly, you wouldn't employ me, but a graphic designer, but one all the same. And believe me, my artistic skills are pretty awful. We've got some more coming through as well. Flickr is one, Spark Post, Flick, couple votes there. So quite a few tools. Have a look at the comments and maybe get some inspiration from some of those tools as well, and also share yours and your lessons too. Even posts, like weekly posts on social media about what your week has been like in the shop, especially as we're kind of reopening, and give people the feel. A lot of people are still anxious about going shopping, so use social media to show people what it's like. Give them a walkthrough of your shop. Get people to feel like what it is to be there if you have a bricks and mortar retail business, that is, of course. So what else do you need to know? And when you've worked out what that is, put it into a spreadsheet and view that spreadsheet on a monthly, too short, fortnightly, minimum, weekly at best, and then work out what's doing well, because you might create a post that goes, this is brilliant. This is exactly what Ed is talking about. And you put it out on social media, and all the metrics data says, no, that was terrible. Is that because it was a bad post? Not necessarily. You might have just caught social media at a quiet time. So try again on a different day, perhaps, or a different time of day. Equally, if something's done really well because the data has told you this is the type of activity your audience loves, then use that data to influence what future content is going to look like, while keeping it varied to some degree at the same time as well. And bearing in mind again that this is there to complement so many other forms of communication. We're using email to reach out with our audiences. We've got any printed assets that we use, and the personality has to connect. We need to make sure that when people visit our social media, that there is a website mailing list that they can sign up to. And when they do sign up to an email list, they know that they can follow us on social media too, and that the personality of all of these channels and connections remains consistent, so we increase the chances of people loving us and what we do. So that is, oh crikey, there's so much I want to kind of dive into that further still, but as I say, time doesn't allow us to in quite the same way. I'm going to come back to the feedback slide in a moment, but just to jump in, if there is more, then we do have some free consultancy sessions, so do go to socialb.co.uk/consultancy. In fact, not only that, we've also launched a new Facebook group as well, which so that I don't get the actual spelling wrong, I'm going to go into here to get it right, but it is facebook.com/groups/online retail marketing. So if you go to the Facebook group, then there's more there for you as well, and plenty more resources, which I'll put up at the end. But I'm going to leave that there first, hand over to Suzanne, and invite any questions you may have.
We have a lot of questions.
To drink my cold coffee.
Just to let everyone know, as we send around the link to the session so you can replay, we have also got a link in there to the resources that Ed has put on the slide. So just wait for the email to click through. Ed, I understand the Facebook group that you guys have launched is specifically for the retail community.
Yep.
So I'd absolutely join it. There'll be, hopefully, I think from what I understand the group is for, it's to help you guys do some peer-to-peer sharing of some of the things that you're learning, share some insight on tools, and really specific to help you guys get online and make the most of social. So I'm not selling it, but I think it's a really good group. So I'd highly
Evie's put a
recommend it.
link in the comments box, so visit it from there. And just to reiterate Suzanne's point, if I may, we need each other more than we ever have as we open our doors again and invite our customers in. So the more tips and benefits we can share from each other, the benefit. And our Facebook group is a great platform to do that.
Great. I'm going to go to the questions, but I'm going to quickly answer Andrea's. So Andrea, you're asking about a webinar for Pinterest. One of Ed's colleagues, Amy, is a massive Pinterest fan, and we've actually got a session coming up in about 2 weeks that's going to go through how you use all the platforms. We're touching on Pinterest in that. We're also touching on TikTok in that as well. So anyway, to head on to the questions. So I'm going to head off these ones early, Ed, because you did open up the hashtag question. You said, so question from Jill, why the recommendation to not use hashtags on Facebook?
Well, mainly because most people, you're looking to connect with your target. If you are specific, if you're creating a hashtag for a specific campaign, then keeping that consistent across all social media platforms isn't necessarily a bad thing, and I would advocate that. But by and large, bearing in mind the personal settings for most Facebook users is, or at least should be, private, which means actually you can't reach out to them, you can't share it with them. It's kind of one-way traffic, if you like, and people therefore won't necessarily connect in quite the same way they do on Instagram or Twitter, etc., where because if you normally with a hashtag, you take Instagram or Twitter, you click on a hashtag and you see all the other people who are talking about that hashtag, whereas you do it with Facebook, what you'll really see is just loads of pages using that hashtag to sell their products and services. It's not used in quite the engaging way. It's not used as like a conversation centerpiece. But if you're creating a hashtag as part of an online campaign you're running, then it would be churlish not to include it in your cover photo or include it in your Facebook post in some degree. But because you can't build a conversation around it in the same way you can in Instagram and Twitter, it's meaningless.
Okay, and just one more on hashtags, mainly because this was quite an interesting question, I thought. It's from Sarah. She said she's recently posted on Insta and found that when she posted again with the same hashtag, it replaced her original post on the search. She was able to check with a few people that were using that tag, and that original post disappeared. Would you recommend using the same hashtag? Does that sound like something that you've encountered before, or do you think she should be varying them?
No, using a hashtag is great. So my hashtag, hashtag, let's say hashtag rules, if you like, are very much around the specifics. So a specific of topic of conversation. So take a particular town or a particular industry. There will be, or even, we see it on TV, hashtag I don't doubt football is back will be a hashtag that appears back on our social media channels later today, and there'll be variants, others as well. It's a specific topic of conversation. And yes, if that's a topic of conversation, if that forms part of what you do, then include it. But the reason why they tend to replace it is because what they don't want to do is end up with people spamming a hashtag. And often, and I'm not saying for a moment that, was it Sarah you mentioned? So so forgive me. So I'm not for a moment suggesting that Sarah would do that, but many businesses would kind of sidestep the engagement side of it and just spam the life out of a hashtag to make those more prominent. So the solution to that is, well, we'll use that one to replace it. Focus more on the quality of the content and let the hashtags be an addition to it rather than let hashtags drive your content. But I would keep the hashtags in there. I'll keep the same hashtag and answer your question.
Fantastic. Okay, so one on engagement. Actually, we've got quite a few on engagement. To start off with, again, I think this was different, Sarah, but she said, what is a good engagement rate for the main platforms? What would you say is a rule of thumb? Is there a number you should look for?
So there's an industry average here which incorporates both offline and online activity, which tends to be above around 1.5 to 2%. So it's a relatively low number, but if you consider the amount of people who actually see a post versus those who act upon it, it's always going to be a low number. If you can consistently see above 2% in your engagement rate, you're on the right track. That's the direct answer to that question. It seemingly seems a low number, but keep building on that. Keep focusing on that engagement rate which I like the fact it's the focus rather than just the number of people who see it, and you'll see it will steadily climb. But 2% is the kind of the minimum you really want to be striking on a regular basis.
Okay, that's great. And a question from Laura. She says, would you say short focused posts are generally a lot more effective than trying to get lots of information over in one go? She says she can sometimes feel it's try too hard to do social media right when it might be better to do a less is more approach.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I'm with Laura on this one. You know, the interesting thing that backs this up, when Twitter originally had 140 characters, the optimum length of an engaging tweet was around 80 to 100 characters. But yet when they doubled their character limit to 280, the optimum length of an engaging tweet remained at between 80 and 100 characters. So Laura, you're right, less is more. My belief is if you're using text because it's important, because it's engaging, because you've got something that is an important thread throughout and you're going to keep the attention of the reader, then make it long. If you feel like you're going into too much detail, you're potentially covering 3 or 4 posts in one, then maybe it's time to shorten it. But yeah, I'm with Laura on this. The general data does seem to back up less is more. And also, the more text we add, there's got to be a call to action in there at some point. That call to action is click here or answer a question. The more text we put in there, the more chances we're going to lose that call to action amongst everything else that's included within that post. So less is more, yes.
Okay, do one more question on engagement, then we're going to move to the metrics questions. So we've got something from Richard, and he says that they're a museum rather than a shop, so they don't physically have an online site to sell. Do you have any specific advice for attracting people to bring on to come on site? So any questions any advice in terms of creating that engaging posts that drags people in rather than buys online?
A lot of museums do some fantastic work with as part of outreach programs in getting schools, getting children, and to kind of get immersed into the focus of that museum, whether it's history, science, or something else. My answer to the question is get people engaged in what that is. So, for example, you could show something that maybe you could invite those who are looking at that post to try and recreate. If you're doing an archaeological dig, then I'm not saying that you invite your post to you invite those who are connected to you to go and dig up their garden or the street in front of their house, but could they create a mini version in their house to do that as well? So something like that would be quite useful. Equally as well, try and show something that you don't ordinarily see. So when you go into the museum, you'll see the displays, you'll see the descriptions of the displays, you'll see the interaction as well. Social media is a way to maybe show something aside from that. So something that maybe you don't see when you go in the museum. Show something that is maybe got that wow factor that you didn't realize, that showcases why that museum is there, to encourage people to go in and see all the other bits they can see when they're in there. So user generated content is the best thing that we can do ultimately, whatever the business is, but equally as well, showing something and showing the people who work at the museum and the volunteers and the paid staff and why they do it. And the people behind it can often also drive a human factor, which is always engaging.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to ask that one because I feel a lot of our retailers are looking for that kind of that magic thing that's going to pull people from online into stores. And I think museums are the same as most great indies. You have so much content and so many things to learn. You can get really creative and make people curious about coming into store or going into museums. I think you've got so much opportunity to play with.
There's a brilliant series on YouTube called Let's Go Live, which quite frankly has made my homeschooling just that little bit easier, at least for me. I can't say for the kids, but it's a science show that's on YouTube every day. And a lot of it is getting children to kind of make some of the science stuff that they do in the program. Take that and how can you translate that to your own business and offer a similar experience of here are the things you need at home to replicate this, try and make it yourself and show us the results. I think that would be wonderful.
Okay, fantastic. Right, metric questions. So some of these hopefully will be quite short, sharp. But Stephen asks, he has analytics in his Shopify account. Should he also get Google Analytics as well, or is it the same data?
No, Google Analytics is, I would get Google Analytics on there as well. There'll be a crossover of data, of course. but there will be a difference too. Bearing in mind that a lot of people will go to the business behind the website to explore more about the element of building the trust within it. And when you go to that website behind the Shopify account, you might not necessarily see the same level as you would do directly through the selling point in Shopify. So my indication is, and given the simplicity of getting it on there as well from the code, and it's free and put it on, get it onto your website as well. There'll be a crossover information, but I don't doubt you'll learn some additional data too.
Okay, great. And then a question from Amy. Does Instagram only analyze your page from the moment you activate Insights? She's recently started the new account, but it's only showing the analysis from the moment she activated the setting. Is that normal?
Sorry, were you saying Instagram or Google Analytics?
Instagram. So yeah, sorry. Different. Sorry, Ed. Yeah.
No,
Instagram.
it's all right. No, you did say Instagram. I thought you said Instagram, but I wanted to check that I got my answer right. I guess I can answer both. Google Analytics only from the moment you upload it, and Instagram only from the post that you share from there as well. It doesn't have it previously, ultimately, because you only have to convert it to a business page for that data to therefore be relevant. Before that, it wasn't a business page. When you convert it to a data page, that insights kicks in. So it can only give you the information from that moment. It can tell you what your Instagram business page is achieving, but it can't tell you what it was doing before because it wasn't a business page.
Yeah. Okay, great. So there's a really specific question here from Anna, and quite a brave question, I think. She says she ran an ad on Google last week and got about 560 clicks, but no sales. She had engagement on Facebook, but this week also she's had no sales. They've suddenly dropped from previous periods of this week. Would this many clicks and no sales, would that indicate that there could be a problem on the website?
It's a fascinating one, and by all means, get in touch to see if we can explore this a little bit further. It's difficult and therefore dangerous for me to say specifically what that cause may be. The most common causes could be it's slow to load. We're not a very patient race, the human race. So the longer a site takes to load, the longer that could be. It could be that there's a disconnect between what the advert is telling me and what the product is. So for example, if I click on an advert and then I go to a page, and then to buy that product, I have to go to another page, or I have to search that product out and then go to another page, that will impact the sales as well. We've got to make the process as simple as possible. It could be that it's non-responsive, which means the website looks great on a laptop or desktop, but it doesn't look great on a tablet or a phone. It doesn't fit accordingly, and that could impact it as well. So those are the most common reasons. Obviously, I can't specify what this is without seeing it.
No.
But have a look at those first, because they're often... Try and put yourself in the shoes of the person clicking on the ad, and what does that process look like? And every additional step on top of clicking on the ad that you're making your customer make is a step you're going to lose some of them. And that could be one of the reasons for it. So, but if not, get in touch and we'll have a look.
Okay. Quick question on this from David. He said, what are your thoughts on URL builders? So his original webmaster was discussing this, has recommended it. Would you recommend a URL builder?
So when he's talking about URL builders, are we talking about the campaigns within Google Analytics? I'm assuming it's
yeah, there's not a lot of context in the question. It just simply says, thoughts on my original webmaster was discussing URL builders in his recent session. What are your thoughts on using these? So I'm guessing it is within Google.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately, if you've got the ability to, when you set a URL builder, or Bitly is another one for this one, and you're using it to track the links, it's pretty key, because you want to know where specific traffic is coming from for certain aspects within the website. And URL builders are great for that one. They can be a little bit more complex to put together, but if you do that, and if you can add financial goals towards those two, then they become very powerful tools. So when used correctly, I think they're great. It's difficult for me to put more meat on the bones of that response without knowing the specifics of the context, but in short, I'm a fan of them.
Okay, great. So question from Natasha, this one came quite early on. What's your opinion of using another company to do social media for you? When does it become worth the money?
So it's always a challenge to answer, because we do this service ourselves. At the same time, I'm not a massive fan of it, but there's a difference for that, and I'll add some context around that. So I'm all for another company creating social media and outsourcing it. Ultimately, if you don't have time for social media, you're not a fan of it, then why would you do it yourself? Because you're only going to make the situation worse. But you have to have faith that company is doing it right. And really, no one knows your business better than you. So we offer that as Social Bee, but it's not a cheap service, because we immerse ourselves in your business to produce the content that's going to be effective and engaging for your audience, as if you were doing it. Many social media managers out there would say, I charge you this much money for doing 3 posts a week. And I often find that's dangerous, because actually, who's to say that 3 posts a week is right or wrong? It should be what your audience dictates. And sometimes, and when you've got something to say, ultimately every post should have a purpose, right? So as a general rule, I would do it in-house, because no one knows your business better than you. But if you are going to outsource it because you hate social media, or you just don't get it, and that's okay, or you haven't got the time to do it, outsource it to someone who is going to immerse themselves into yours. And I would ask them at the early stage, can you show me a case study of when you've achieved the goal of a company by using social media, whatever that goal may be? We can produce that. And as I say, we provide the service, and it's not a cheap service, but that's why, because it requires the investment to get it right. But ask that from the people who are offering you the service, and then take it from there.
That's great. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you guys on the spot.
No, that's right. I like a challenging question.
So, Hannah, you mentioned Buffer. So what social platforms does Buffer allow you to schedule for?
All of them, as far, well, all of them. There's millions of them. So I use it for Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Facebook scheduling, I use Facebook for that, which I think if you're scheduling on Facebook, then you're best to do it within Facebook, primarily because when you schedule a link in Facebook, it embeds the link in the post, whereas if you schedule it through a third-party app, it doesn't in quite the same fashion. So therefore, it looks better and increase engagement. So that's the platforms that it uses for me, and that's why I like it. So it uses the primary platforms. I don't know what you're specifically looking for that. Why I prefer Buffer is because it's a very simple tool. It does one job, and that's scheduling. And many other platforms like Sprout Social, Hootsuite, scheduling is part of a number of other tools. So because Pinterest too, as Sarah's put in, it does Pinterest. But I don't use Pinterest, so thank you for adding that. I appreciate that, Sarah. But yeah, it uses the primary platforms.
Okay, great. And just whilst we're talking about scheduling, I'm assuming that would also schedule Instagram stories too? Or what would you say is the best platform for Instagram stories? Is there a particular one that springs to mind?
No, well, yes, Instagram. Call me old school, but Instagram for that as well, I'm afraid.
No, that makes sense. I thought I'd ask because it just popped up. So I have two last questions, both on engagement and measuring engagement rates. So I think they're nice ones to end on. So Kate says, for engagement rate, do you recommend calculating a post's engagement rate figure in regards to the total number of followers you have, or the number of posts, the number of people that post reached?
Well, both.
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure that your posts are reaching more people. Remember the point I made before, Kate, that the more you create engagement, the more your post will reach. And of course, when people share it, it reaches out more. So if you're specifically measuring it against the engagement, I would do the engagement against the post reach, because that also then takes into account those who have shared it. But knowing how many your posts reach and how many followers you have are important metrics to continue to follow, and also because followers, because the post reach is part of the engagement side of it, which is more valuable than followers themselves, then in answer directly, I would say post reach, but actually all of those bits of data is important.
Okay, great. I'm gonna give you Amber's question, but just before I answer it, it's worth saying that we do have an entire session on this in about 2 weeks with Lindsay, so it can go anywhere. So she says, do you have any tips for creating interesting and engagement social media posts when your content creation is limited by licensing approval around images? Do you have any, what would be your advice for that?
My advice would be tune in 2 weeks' time, and Lindsay will give you some more information about. So this is specifically around licensing for images. I mean, it's
licensed products.
Yeah. So licensed products of images. It's not everything has to be an image of a specific product themselves. So creating user-generated content often negates the licensed product issue, because it's the users that are sharing those on social media and tagging you in their posts and interacting with you as a result. So the more user-generated content you can create, the better. Running polls can be great as well. Sometimes there are some third-party apps because that fit in with polls, which were on Facebook. Now they're off and will hopefully be back on again soon. And even just simply asking questions, creating, using tools like Canva to create an evocative aspect of an emotion about the business and about the products, but without featuring the product itself, because you haven't got the permission to do so. Can help too, and those are the ones that just scratch the surface. But there's, I guess, if I knew what the product was more specifically, I could go into more in depth about that. But yeah, and Lindsay will be able to give you more in a couple of weeks too.
Yeah, and I think on that, I think when you're working with licensed property, whilst you may be restricted on the images, the reason that I asked Ed that question was just to highlight that you can be more creative with it. So for example, if you've got licensed products from the Friends TV show, you can ask a whole stream of questions and images that are based around that aren't product led. And going back to Ed's first point, you don't use social media to sell, so you don't necessarily be pushing product images. There we go, I was listening. So although you say that the innovation is a little bit restricted, Amber, what I'd say is think really creatively. There's where there's a will, there's a way, and often engagement comes through other things than product posts. But we have got a really good session with Lindsay on I think the first week in July around creative content creation and how you can get the most out of the content that you're posting. But on that, Ed, thank you so much. I've seen from the comments in the chat, it's been incredibly helpful for people who've tuned in. And obviously, as always, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Phenomenal questions. Thank you for your involvement. Thank you for the tips that people have added to. Even I've learned one or two things from those. And no, thank you very much. It's been incredibly enjoyable.
That's great. And everyone, look out for the links on the email I'll send through in about 5 or 10 minutes with the replays and also links to those resources. And do definitely think about joining the Facebook group too. But I'll see you all next week. Bye.